Have you ever walked away from a conversation replaying every little detail, wondering if you said something wrong? Maybe your friend didn't smile as much as usual, or a coworker's tone seemed colder than you expected. Your brain starts spinning stories. Did I offend them? Are they upset? Did I miss a cue? That mental spiral is one of the most common tricks the mind plays, misreading social signals. It happens to everyone, even people who seem perfectly confident and socially fluent. But there's a fascinating reason why. Our brains evolved to read human faces and voices long before there were text messages, emails, or video calls. And that ancient equipment sometimes struggles to keep up with modern life. Let's unpack what's really going on when your brain misfires socially, and what you can do to correct it. Picture this. You wave at a neighbor who doesn't wave back. Instantly a thought flashes. They ignored me. Maybe they don't like me. But a study from the University of British Columbia found that in over 70% of these moments, the snub wasn't personal at all. The other person simply didn't see the wave, or their attention was elsewhere. Our brains, however, rarely leave it at that. They fill in blanks with stories. It's called social inference, and it's one of the most error-prone processes in human psychology. When we make an inference, we use limited cues like a glance, a tone, or a pause to guess what someone else feels or thinks. But because we're guessing, our own emotions act as filters. If you're anxious, you'll read neutral faces as slightly negative. If you're in a good mood, you'll assume the best. A 2019 study in Nature Human Behavior showed that people under mild stress were 30% more likely to interpret neutral expressions as threatening. That means your mood can literally change how you see someone's face. The roots of this bias go deep. Thousands of years ago, over-interpreting danger kept us alive. If someone in your tribe frowned, it could signal conflict or rejection, something you couldn't afford to ignore. So evolution wired us with a better safe than sorry system. When in doubt, assume the worst, protect yourself, and sort out the details later. The trouble is, modern life isn't a prehistoric campfire. We interact with dozens of people every day, many of them strangers. Our ancient alert system triggers constantly, flagging harmless signals as threats. That's why a single unread message can stir anxiety. Your brain senses social danger where none exists. Another reason we misread signals is that perception happens faster than reflection. Neuroscientists have measured that the brain's amygdala reacts to facial expressions in about 150 milliseconds. That's faster than conscious thought. By the time you think she looks annoyed, your body has already released stress hormones based on that quick read. This is what psychologists call low-road processing. It's fast, automatic, and emotionally charged. It's helpful in emergencies, but terrible for subtle social nuance. You might sense irritation in someone's face when it's really just concentration, or you might misinterpret a pause as disapproval when it's just someone choosing their words. Let's take texting as an example. Digital communication removes tone, facial expression, and timing cues that our brains rely on. A simple "sure" in a message can feel dismissive even if the sender meant agreement. A 2021 Pew Research survey found that about 67% of adults admit they've misunderstood the tone of a text or email. Our brains fill gaps with emotion. If we're already worried about being judged, we'll read a neutral message as cold. That's why online arguments escalate so quickly. Each side reacts not to the words, but to the imagined emotion behind them. So how do we stop misreading signals? The first step is awareness. Just knowing your brain is prone to these shortcuts helps you pause before reacting. The second step is curiosity. Instead of assuming what another person feels, ask or observe longer. Social psychologist Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago found that when people actually verify their assumptions in conversation, accuracy about others' emotions jumps from around 20% to nearly 60%. That's a huge improvement, just from checking instead of guessing. You can practice this in small ways. If a friend seems distant, don't fill the silence with stories. Say, "You seem quiet today. Is everything okay?" You might find they're just tired, not upset. Another useful tool is to calibrate your baseline. Different people have different resting expressions. Some look serious when they're perfectly happy, others smile constantly even when they're stressed. If you know this about someone, you won't misinterpret their default face as a mood shift. In Japan, for example, social norms encourage subtle expressions. In the United States, people show more overt emotion. Cross-cultural studies show that Americans rate Japanese faces as less friendly, while Japanese participants rate American faces as too intense. Neither interpretation is wrong, it's just filtered through cultural expectations. So the next time you sense tension, consider whether it might be a mismatch of communication styles, not feelings. Now let's talk about overthinking, the silent amplifier of misreading. Rumination doesn't just replay events, it distorts them. Neuroimaging research from Stanford shows that when people repeatedly analyze social mistakes, activity spikes in the brain's default mode network, the region linked to self-referential thought. This loop makes every ambiguous cue feel more personal. You may begin to believe someone's brief distraction was your fault. That belief triggers cortisol, which heightens vigilance, which makes you notice even more potential signs of rejection. It's a self-feeding cycle. Breaking it starts with grounding in the present moment. Take a slow breath, feel your feet on the floor, and remind yourself, I don't have all the data yet. That simple phrase interrupts the loop. One of the most surprising findings in recent psychology is how poor humans actually are at reading minds. We think we know what others think of us, but research says otherwise. In a 2022 meta-analysis covering more than 30,000 participants, average accuracy in judging others' impressions was only 36%. That means 2/3 of the time, we're wrong. Yet confidence doesn't correlate with accuracy. Even people who say, I'm great at reading people, often show the same error rate as everyone else. This mismatch is called the illusion of insight. The more familiar we are with someone, the more we think we understand them, but we often project our own patterns onto them instead. That's why couples misread each other despite years together. Familiarity breeds assumptions, not necessarily understanding. Let's look at a more specific trap, the negativity bias. Humans remember negative social experiences about 5 times more strongly than positive ones. So one awkward silence can outweigh 5 friendly chats in your memory. This bias likely helped our ancestors avoid social rejection, but in today's world it fuels insecurity. You might recall every time someone didn't laugh at your joke, but forget all the times they did. Keeping a brief social journal can help rebalance this. At the end of the day, write down one positive social cue you noticed: a smile, a thank you, a kind message. Doing this for 2 weeks has been shown in positive psychology research to reduce perceived social threat by nearly 25%. It retrains your attention to notice safety, not just danger. Another powerful correction comes from body awareness. When you feel nervous, your body sends subtle cues, tight shoulders, rapid breathing, that you might unconsciously mirror onto others. If you're tense, you'll see tension. It's called projection through embodiment. Before an important conversation, try this quick reset. Take one deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Relax your jaw. Let your shoulders drop. You'll be surprised how this changes what you notice in others. Your perception literally softens when your body does. We also misread signals because we overvalue negative feedback and undervalue neutral or positive ones. Psychologists call this asymmetric weighting. If one person gives you criticism and 9 give you compliments, you'll focus on the one critic. In a workplace survey by Gallup, employees said they needed roughly 5 pieces of positive feedback to balance 1 negative. So if you feel socially uneasy after a meeting, ask yourself, am I focusing on the one frown and ignoring all the nods? Our attention is drawn to threat cues, but that doesn't mean they tell the full story. Another subtle distortion happens in group settings. Imagine giving a presentation and noticing one person looking at their phone. Your brain flags it as disinterest, but maybe they're taking notes or checking a relevant fact. Researchers at Princeton used eye tracking during meetings and found that people often looked away while still mentally engaged. Visual attention didn't equal social attention, yet presenters consistently rated those individuals as bored. In other words, what you see isn't always what's true. Social media adds another layer. Online, we interpret likes, comments, and views as signals of acceptance or rejection. But these metrics are noisy. Algorithms, time zones, and scrolling habits influence them more than actual opinion. A 2023 study in Computers in Human Behavior found that lower engagement on posts predicted drops in mood, even when participants knew the platform was throttling reach algorithmically. Our brains still took it personally. The antidote is perspective. Remember, social media is a mirror built with funhouse glass. It reflects something, but never the full picture. Now let's explore how training can sharpen social accuracy. Psychologists use the term mentalizing. the ability to imagine what others are thinking or feeling without assuming. It's like empathy with a question mark at the end. Training programs that strengthen mentalizing, such as brief mindfulness or perspective-taking exercises, have shown measurable results. A 2020 randomized trial at University College London found that just 15 minutes of guided perspective practice twice a week improved participants' emotional reading accuracy by 23% after 1 month. You can do this informally. When you're in conversation, silently ask yourself, what else could be going on for them right now? That keeps your mind open instead of jumping to conclusions. Here's a story. A client once told me she felt her boss disliked her because he rarely smiled during meetings. She'd spend hours analyzing his tone and posture. When she finally asked for feedback, he said he admired her focus and assumed she preferred direct communication. The entire anxiety spiral was built on a misread signal. After that, she started checking perceptions early instead of letting them grow. It's a small habit with huge payoff, clarity instead of speculation. There's also the role of memory. Our recollection of social events isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Each time we revisit it, we edit slightly based on current mood. If you feel down, you'll remember the conversation as colder than it was. In lab experiments, participants who watched the same social interaction clip a week apart rated it more negatively when they were tired or stressed. So even your own past experiences can deceive you. That's why journaling right after an event captures a more accurate snapshot than relying on later memory. Let's talk about empathy fatigue. When you're emotionally drained, your brain's ability to read others accurately diminishes. Healthcare workers, teachers, and parents often experience this. MRI studies show reduced activation in the temporoparietal junction, an area tied to perspective taking, after prolonged stress. So if you notice yourself misjudging people more often, it might not be a character flaw. It might be exhaustion. Rest and self-care literally restore your social perception circuits. Sleep, in particular, matters. After 1 night of poor sleep, accuracy in reading facial emotions drops by about 10%. That might sound small, but across a week it compounds into major misunderstandings. Another key factor is context. Our brains interpret cues differently depending on environment. A whisper in a library carries a different meaning than a whisper at a party, yet we often ignore context when judging others. If someone crosses their arms in winter, they're likely cold, not defensive. If they check their watch near the end of a meeting, maybe they have another appointment. Always test your interpretation against context. Is there a non-personal reason this cue might appear? That single question can save countless social headaches. And here's something counterintuitive. Confidence improves accuracy not because confident people read better, but because they react slower. They don't rush to fill silence or label every expression. They allow ambiguity. And in that space, real understanding grows. So if you want to read people better, practice tolerating not knowing. Let the moment breathe. Now a quick exercise. Think of the last time you felt socially uneasy. Replay it for a moment. Now ask yourself, what else could have been true? List 3 alternative explanations. Maybe your friend's short reply meant they were busy, not bored. Maybe that coworker's sigh was about their workload, not your comment. This simple reframing trains your brain to generate options instead of conclusions. Over time, it rewires the prediction circuits that cause misreads. Let's not forget that misreading goes both ways. Others misread you too. The way you hold your phone, the expression on your face, even your silence can be interpreted in countless ways. So it's helpful to communicate your internal state explicitly. If you're quiet because you're thinking, say so. If you're distracted by a deadline, mention it. Transparency reduces the room for projection. A workplace experiment at Google showed that teams who practiced state checking, briefly stating what's on their mind before meetings, reported 33% fewer interpersonal misunderstandings. Clarity beats mind reading every time. Sometimes, however, misreads are rooted in deeper patterns like social anxiety or past rejection. If you grew up in an environment where criticism was common, your brain may be hyper-attuned to threat cues. Even neutral feedback can feel harsh. Therapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy help recalibrate this. In CBT, you learn to test your interpretations against evidence. Over time, the brain learns that not every frown means danger. This isn't about ignoring signals, it's about weighting them accurately. Another fascinating line of research involves mirror neurons, cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you see someone else do it. They're thought to underpin empathy, but mirror neurons also amplify emotional contagion. If someone near you is anxious, your body can mirror that tension before your mind notices. That's why group moods shift quickly. A calm leader can steady a room. A nervous one can ignite collective jitters. Being aware of this dynamic helps you interpret emotions as shared, not necessarily directed at you. Now here's a quick paradox. The better you know someone, the more context you have, but also the more history you project. Every past argument, every praise, every tiny disappointment colors how you read their present cues. One practical trick is to reset context occasionally. Imagine you're meeting that person for the first time. What would you notice without the baggage? That mental refresh can reveal how much of your reaction belongs to the past, not the present. Humor can also recalibrate social perception. Laughter releases oxytocin and lowers defensive posturing. Shared humor signals safety, which helps your brain relax its threat filters. That's why a light joke can dissolve tension faster than logic. Even recalling a funny memory before a difficult conversation primes your brain for connection. It's not about forcing cheerfulness, it's about easing the guard dog in your mind. Let's bring all this together. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly guesses what others mean using patterns from your past. Those guesses feel like facts, but they're just hypotheses. When you treat them as hypotheses, testable, flexible, you open space for real connection. When you treat them as truth, you close that space and react defensively. So next time someone's tone or expression feels off, pause. Ask yourself, what's another possible story here? Then choose curiosity over certainty. Over time, these small pauses create a powerful shift. You stop living in imagined social dramas and start engaging with actual people. You notice warmth instead of threat, nuance instead of judgment, and your relationships become lighter, more genuine, more resilient. If this exploration of how your brain misreads social signals resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to Tortoise Brain. It's a simple way to keep growing your understanding of the mind, slowly, steadily, one insight at a time. Our brains may never be perfect interpreters, but awareness turns imperfection into wisdom. Every misunderstanding is an opportunity to learn how perception works, and how compassion begins when we admit we don't always see clearly, but we're willing to try.